大家好，我们是古今啊 Wagi Shyac， 欢迎收看Ita 看世界英语论坛，我是 Wagi。Welcome to the Ita Sailor World English Forum. I'm Wagi.
I'm Rath Wang, today's co-host.
On January 20th, Donald J. Trump took office as the 47th President of the United States. At his inauguration, Trump highlighted plans for his second term, from withdrawing from the U.S. from the Paris Agreement, declaring a state of emergency at the southern border to expel drug trafficking cartels, to announcing a national energy emergency to boost oil production and lower prices. He also brought up growing Chinese influence on the Panama Canal.
Trump signed an executive order the next day to start withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement. He then followed with announcing tariffs on Canada and Mexico. This is all while tensions grew over China's presence in the Panama Canal. On February 2nd, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Panama, urging Panama City to reduce Chinese influence in the strategic waterway or face potential U.S. retaliation. Panama President Jose Raul Mulino rejected any suggestion of a U.S. takeover, but confirmed that an audit of Chinese-controlled ports is underway and that Panama will not renew its Belt and Road Initiative agreement.
In this episode of Ita Insights, we will explore Trump's plans and what lies ahead for the world under Trump 2.0.
Joining us today are Wen-Ti Sung, non-resident fellow of the Global China Hub at the Atlantic Council.
Thank you for having me.
William Stanton, former American Institute in Taiwan director.
Happy to be here.
Raymond Sung, vice president of the Prospect Foundation.
Honored to be here.
Welcome, everyone. Let's start with Trump's recent announcements to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Health Organization, WHO. This has sent ripples near and far, with even Trump allies, U.S. oil and gas producers, criticizing the Paris Agreement's withdrawal, citing concerns around global clean energy investment.
Trump also announced on January 21st U.S. withdrawal from the WHO, a move that could have significant implications on global health. As its biggest contributor, the U.S. provided approximately $1.3 billion in funding during 2022 to 2023 alone. Experts warn that this could create a vacuum where other nations, such as China, could fill, possibly shifting the balance of power within global health. William, why did Trump pull out of this?
Well, Donald Trump has a long tradition of not welcoming any international organizations. I think in the particular case of the WHO and also the Paris Agreement, he doesn't recognize that both climate and disease know no boundaries and do not respect international lines between countries. They're a threat to everyone, and therefore participation by the globe is necessary to fight them.
So what does this mean for such organizations in terms of global governance and in terms of all this?
Well, obviously, by withdrawing from these organizations, the U.S. has always been the principal donor, the largest donor, at least, to these organizations. This will weaken the organizations in their ability to achieve their goals. So in that sense, it's not only not good for them, but it's not good for the United States, I think, in the long run.
So, Wendy, what are the implications of the U.S. withdrawal from global organizations in the region? And are we seeing dynamic shifts in the global governance and alliances?
I mean, first and foremost, what this pullout of the U.S. from international organization is going to mean is a decrease in international leadership in these major international multilateral forums. What that suggests for smaller and medium-sized states is that when these institutions get weakened, they feel like they don't have as much of a gathering place from at which they can gather, they can talk with each other and find ways to use collective diplomacy to both rally their resources together as well to defend themselves from those other bigger states who may be a lot more coercively oriented. What that suggests, I think, for us is a greater decrease of international leadership and therefore increase of centripetal forces, or rather centrifugal forces for international community. And these trends are not the best signs for, I think, smaller actors in the international community.
William, speaking of the region and the elephant in the room, what does this mean for China?
Well, clearly, to my mind, it means that we strengthen the ability of China to have overwhelming influence on these organizations, because they already are much better at cultivating the many developing countries who are parts of these organizations, and they become, in a sense, a voice and a leader for these other countries. So it doesn't strengthen the U.S. hand in promoting an open, liberal world organization for everyone.
Raymond, turning to you from a legal standpoint, what does this also mean for Taiwan, given the complexity of the political status here?
Taiwan's case is a very special one because Taiwan is none of the member of all those organizations, but what we are very eager to contribute, very eager to enter, to play a positive role and make some contributions in those global forums. But nonetheless, I think being excluded, but doesn't mean that Taiwan cannot contribute. So it's come to be a choice of forums. If the WHO will not grant it its admission to Taiwan, and no role to be played, and even coordinating roles, Taiwan can play bilaterally, for example, by donating and by helping, providing assistance to areas and countries where most needed for Taiwan's expertise and also equipment.
So it's an opportunity for Taiwan.
Yes, I would say so.
I'd like William to share more. So do you think that, is this a move to create new frameworks that prioritize U.S. interests without Chinese and Russian clout?
Well, certainly, as Trump is always saying, America first, foremost. He, projects a vision of America as a nationalist leading power, and he's not particularly interested in cooperation or the views of other countries. So, in a certain sense, it strengthens the hands of adversaries like China and Russia, to whom other countries will now turn for guidance and support.
So can you share more with it?
Yeah, I think I agree with William's assessment as well. I think when U.S. is trying to find ways to disengage from international community, naturally other countries in the world will be looking for alternative sources of leadership as the next safety net for them. Now, last time around, 4 years ago, under Trump 1.0, for example, we still have strong leaders in other members of the Quad, especially. You had definitely a strong Japanese Prime Minister under Abe. You had a strong Australian government, and really you have a much more cohesive European Union. Not that it was ever perfect, but one could argue that perhaps EU of 2016 is a bit more coherent than one of 2024, for example. So now that not only do you have a less engaged US, but you also have a less strong and coherent secondary leader from the broader Western camp. That means where else will other countries be looking to for alternative social leadership? Like it or not, I think China will find a greater space to play that role, and that's certainly a consideration that many will be thinking about as we go about strategizing.
And Raymond, do you have any response?
On the other side of the coin is the poor performance of those international organizations, especially the dissatisfaction of the United States, because the decision-making role is for majority voting, and of course China has predominant influences among the countries in the global south, and if you count on the numbers of countries that the U.S. will not push its agendas, and also for the global health, the WHO didn't do a very good job, and actually China has been the consistent breaker of the rules in terms of notification about early warning of the pandemics. So lack of leadership definitely. And but greater influence also means greater responsibility. Whether China can fill in that role is very, very doubtful.
So such withdrawal send strong political messages, but they also raise concerns about U.S. long-term engagement in global governance. Now let's turn to Trump's Greenland comments. And Greenland is a self-governing territory of Denmark. And Trump said he wants to make Greenland a part of the U.S. and saying that Greenland is a national security issue as a gateway for Russian and Chinese ships. And Trump did not rule out using economic or military means to force Denmark to cede the territory.
Let's take a look at some territorial acquisitions in U.S. history. In 1803, Thomas Jefferson purchased the Louisiana Territory from France. And in 1867, Andrew Johnson bought Alaska from Russia. While in 1946, Harry Truman proposed to buy Greenland from Denmark. William, back to you again. What's behind Trump's renewed interest in Greenland?
Well, he seems to be a traditional expansionist. More territory means more power, which he thinks the U.S. deserves. And of course, there is this whole tradition of the U.S., beyond even the examples you gave, expanding its territory, taking territory from, for example, Mexico and from Spain, buying from France, as you mentioned. So I think the problem is that this obviously is not welcomed by other countries. It's consistent with "Make America Great Again." But it's a very expansionist view of how you make America great again.
Do you see it as outdated, or do you feel this is?
Well, it's outdated,
Trump?
Except for the fact that there is a justification in the way that, for example, China has already declared itself, I think back in 2018, as a near-Arctic power, whatever that might mean. I think at the time, Secretary of State Pompeo said that's a meaningless self-description. But certainly also when you see the aggressiveness of Russia toward Ukraine, toward other territories in its periphery, it's not surprising that the U.S., we would have a leader who might say, well, the U.S. also has to protect some of its close-in interests, like Greenland and later Panama and so forth.
And Raymond, I'm curious that are there any implications on Asia as the goal is to counter China, right?
Yes, I think the excuses for countering China's influence has been abused or overly used in a certain way. In terms of Greenland, the justification seems to suggest that there's geopolitical concerns about the control over that, especially for military purposes, especially not falling to Chinese control. In that case, that Chinese will have the capability to adjust the courses of intercontinental missiles, which might constitute a threat for the U.S. mainland. That's a geopolitical and military concern. The second one is about resources. There's a large amount of deposit in the oil and gas underneath the Greenland, also for the rare earth. And rare earth is a very crucial element for making ICT products. And the third one is about navigation, especially when we look at the prospect of the melting of the Arctic ice, and the northeastern navigation route might be navigable, which will mean that we'll greatly shorter the route from the continents. So the geopolitical importance of Greenland is increasing, and the U.S. wants to control that and not to fall into Chinese hand.
So Wendy, how will Trump handle Greenland, given that it's high on his list with national security? And one very important question is that, and how will Greenland to respond?
I think President Trump's style is that he's always looking for a good deal. And moreover, I think for him, it's just like what you used to say during the 2016 campaign in the U.S. side, that he always said that he will bring so much winning that his voter will be tired of winning. So put these two together, I think what he's trying to seek to do is to use maximum pressure on Greenland and Denmark by extension as a way to use somewhat coercive pressure as a way to extract more concessions out of them that may or may not result in the actual form of territorial acquisition. That may potentially be a bargaining chip that he uses to get more other signs of gestures of goodwill from Greenland and Denmark by extension. So while he's talking about Greenland as a matter of territorial conquest, maybe territorial conquest isn't quite the price that he has in mind. So that's Trump. What about Greenland? I think if you're Greenland, it's very straightforward. You are a smaller actor. What you do when you're smaller and there's a bigger power trying to get a piece of you is that you try to find safety in numbers. That will come in the form of Greenland turning more towards the European Union, finding ways to solicit assistance and support from the outside world and try to get other actors beyond EU itself to talk about the need for international norms, including non-coercive territorial conquests.
Raymond, given that Greenland is still officially a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, what would this mean for NATO, given that Denmark and the EU and that part of the world is together in many senses?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, the American states is a part of NATO, and within NATO, and the Greenland is very special territorially. It's being given a high degree of self-determination power, even under the Constitution of Denmark. So firstly, whether they'll got the transition of the territory will got the consent of the Denmark's government, and also, more importantly, about the consent of the Greenlanders. Whether they are willing to reach a deal or get this change of status, or even get cooperations between Denmark and the United States. So I think the rhetoric of Trump makes all that difference. So we concentrate about the change of territorial status, but that's not the only route to achieve a similar aim, so that NATO will secure these very important strategic locations of Greenland, and the United States can also achieve its own aim.
Bill, I wanted to turn to what Raymond just mentioned in terms of the strategic end goal of what Trump wants. So say if Greenland is not a part of the U.S., if that's the end, but what would Trump want to be satisfied in terms of fending off Chinese or whatever foreign influence there?
Well, some of what he wants, we already have, the United States already has, in the sense that we have a base there. But we shouldn't underestimate the geostrategic importance as the ice cap melts for passage through the Arctic area, the potential threats to the United States that creates. So we have to understand there's a certain geostrategic logic to what he wants to do. The question is how you do it and how best to do it. I think any diplomat would say it'd be preferable to have quiet, strong discussions with the Danes and with the Greenlanders to reach some sort of an understanding about the way forward, rather than make public bullying threats toward a weaker neighbor.
While acquiring Greenland may seem far-fetched, the Arctic strategic significance cannot be ignored. So how Greenland ends up is worth following. Now let's take a quick break. Please stay tuned.
Welcome back to Ita See the World. Shifting gears, let's talk about Trump's recent comments on the Panama Canal. Trump accused Panama of charging the U.S. exorbitant fees, claiming that the canal is run by China.
He later said in Phoenix that if the spirit of the agreement, referring to the neutrality treaty, isn't followed, quote, then we will demand the Panama Canal be returned to the United States. Before discussing further, I think it is necessary to understand the historical context of the Panama Canal and the Neutrality Treaty. So Wendy, can you walk us through the history behind the treaty Trump brought up?
Oh yeah, I mean, Panama, as we know, is the one major real estate connecting North America and South America, and therefore, in many ways, it constitutes a major geopolitical choke point, if you will, when it comes to strategic geography of the Western Hemisphere. So naturally, I think for U.S. as one of the leading power of the Western Hemisphere, it wants to find a way to ensure a continued anchor to regional stability, of which Panama Canals is one major part. And that's why around the late 1970s, under U.S. President Jimmy Carter, U.S. signed a treaty with Panama that was come to be known as the Panama Neutrality Treaty, under which U.S. give, well, there's some detail, of course, but basically Panama gets around Panama Canal, but the U.S. Reserves the right to use military intervention when situation calls for it, when it's absolutely necessary, as a way to keep out potentially adversarial forces from having control over that major geopolitical pivot point for the region. And that's why we're looking at this today, now that there are more conversations about China potentially developing a bigger footprint in the Panama Canal. And that's why Trump, I think, at this moment is finding some concern with that development.
So William, how serious is Trump's threat of reclaiming control over the canal?
Well, I think his seriousness has already been justified, because when Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, went to Panama, President Molino, he readily, seemingly agreed that, in fact, he would curtail or let the current agreement that he has with China, its use of the Panama Canal, its investments there, to subside, to run out, and it would be over. So my only problem, I think Trump is perfectly correct that this is a geostrategic necessity for the U.S. in terms of, I think 40% of U.S. cargo goes through the Panama Canal. But I think quietly and through diplomacy, he probably could have achieved the same goal of getting an agreement from the Panamanian government to curtail the influence of China in that area. But President Trump, being President Trump, likes to make big, bold public statements and threats. I think that was probably unnecessary, but other people would argue maybe it helped him achieve his goal. I don't think so, but there you have it.
Despite Panama President Jose Raul Molino calling Trump's claims nonsense, Panama was the first Latin America country to sign up for China's Belt and Road Initiative, or also known as BRI. To Trump and many, this in itself poses a threat to the canal's neutrality. Raymond, what exactly is Chinese influence in the canal and the region as a whole?
Actually, it has some connection with Taiwan. Actually, it all began after Panama severed its diplomatic relations with Taiwan and built this formal diplomatic relations.
And this was pretty
PRC.
recent. This was in the last decade.
And just in the last decade, yes. Actually, after that, the Chinese got firstly concessions through private company based in Hong Kong. And so that it gains de facto control over the running of the 2 ports among the 5 ports. And secondly, about the huge personnel installed there, and Chinese-ized the Panama cultures. And also governmental levels, the signing of the Panama government about the one-by-one rule initiatives further extends the Chinese influence. So that constitute the sources of concern of the United States that if de factoly, and even we have some legal disputes about whether there's a violation of the treaty, whether that's falling to the foreign control, that will justify a use of force and use of other means to take back the control. even that, but put a halt on the de facto extension of Chinese control is being seen essential geopolitically. So that Marco Rubio made that the first priority for his tenure for the state secretary.
Can you talk a bit about how Taiwan falls into that? You said it started when Taiwan severed ties there. But...
Yeah, Panama has been a diplomatic ally with the ROC for a long time. And, but after the taking of office, after Tsai Ing-wen in 2016, China made a deliberate attack on the Tsai administration on the DPP just to discredit and to shrink Taiwan's international space. And one of the branch, among that, another branch is the prevention of Taiwan's bid for international organization. And another branch is taking away Taiwan's allies. Panama was among the first. And, but nobody expected that at that time, that it will result in this the de facto extension of Chinese control over the running of the canal. That Chinese has been very, very clever in doing this kind of infiltration exercise under the radar. And when you discover that the situation is getting very, very extended and advanced, so actually we see the current exercise of the U.S. efforts actually is likely to fill in the vacuums to reassert U.S. paramount interest in this area.
So Panama in itself was strategic, being the first country then. Bill, what are the specific aspects do you feel that the U.S. is concerned of?
Well, as was just mentioned, it's in part the fact that Panama, of course, de-recognized, if you can call it that, Taiwan, and established diplomatic relations with China. Subsequently, you have two Chinese-controlled Hong Kong firms taking over 2 of the 5 ports in the canal. And all of this falling into under the Chinese orbit, there's growing concern that later there could be prohibitions on what cargo can pass through the canal, not only commercial cargo, but also, as has happened in other countries in the world when China's had some influence on those countries, but also for military uses. Submarines and naval ships passing through the canal, that's the main route for the U.S. trying to get to the Asian theater. So it's a big geostrategic concern. I think it was right to be upset about what was happening in Panama. Panama, as we know, when it broke relations with Taiwan, can't really be trusted for its allegiances and what it's willing to do. So it was an understandable concern. I'm not so sure the way it was handled with, again, a public threat was the best way to resolve it. Quiet threats would work probably just as well.
But as you say resolved, do you feel that the Panamanian government is now on par with what the U.S. strategic interests is looking at?
Well, you know, we have to wait and see. I'm a bit skeptical. We know that China uses its money and its influence with many less developed countries around the world to get what it wants. And it might be that this is, you know, there's, for example, there may be people already indebted to China in Panama. So this is a concern we have to understand and work with.
And Wendy, any response?
Yeah, I mean, I think just Bill's point. It's not the what. It's often the how. That's where room for improvement lies when it comes to diplomacy. When Bill said that quiet diplomacy probably would have worked just as well. In that sense, it's a challenge in the era of this era of high visibility of such demands, whereby pressuring in public may secure you faster compliance in the short term, but in the longer term, it may not be the best for maintaining cordial relationship, and it may also potentially, in the longer term, undermine the domestic mandate of your own negotiation partners if you make them be seen as publicly caving in to external pressure. that you always want stable, dependable partner for a long term when it comes to negotiation, because it's a lot of work to deal with new negotiating partner every year or so. And it's in this sense that this could be somewhat of a double-edged sword.
So Trump just mentioned the agreement, that is the neutrality treaty. So Raymond, is the neutrality treaty violated? And can Trump revoke the Panamanian control of the canal by the treaty? What do you think?
That branch of argument is raised for justifying the possible actions that, or the course of actions that the United States might consider in doing. But now it stays as a threat. But there's a question of interpretation whether the neutrality has been indeed violated or not. And the extension of infiltration is causing a special problem because it's a private. On the face of it, it's non-governmental, but it extends de facto control. So, of course, the U.S. will have very, very good legal expertise trying to justify it. But as long as the tool can deliver, I think they will stay back from that as a second reserve tool to really allege a violation of the treaty.
And William, what's your opinion? The violation of the neutrality treaty?
Well, you know, one of the things with any law, any agreement, it's open to interpretation and each side will have its own. I think it was probably wise to raise the issue with Panama. Whether, again, it was done in the right way or, you know, when you publicly threaten someone or a country, there's always going to be residual anger, unhappiness, feeling that you were abused. So in the long run, I don't know if that really tightens the U.S. hold on Panama. I think it's, again, you win more friends with a bit of love than with bitterness. So that's my big concern about the way Trump acts. I think the purpose is correct. We don't want China to have more control over the Panama Canal, but whether the best way to do it is by a frontal assault is a different question.
But going back to the actual substance, in terms of impeding U.S. vessels from passing to the Pacific, how vital is that to Taiwan, you feel, or to the region in terms of the U.S. mounting a response against any military conflict?
Well, I think it is vital because, you know, in the first line of defense is going to be Okinawa. The ships we already have passing through the South China Sea, the East China Sea. But in the long run, if something should happen, a major threat to Taiwan, we would naturally want to put more ships through the canal to go to the aid and support of Taiwan.
It's a question of a room of maneuver. And the U.S. has put pivotal importance about preserving the navigation freedom through all the major channels, including the key channels like the Panama canals. So that's for military maneuvering is critically important.
And Wendy?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both. I think when it comes to deterring a potential Taiwan contingency, obviously you want U.S. to be able to credibly show to any potential adversary that whatever U.S. military presence that could be leveraged for that purpose would not only be from the Pacific, but could be by oceanic as well, namely from the Atlantic side as well. So for that purpose, I think ready access through the Panama Canal is important to boosting deterrence.
The Panama Canal remains a critical global trade point. If Trump follows through, we may see more tension between the U.S. and Panama, as well as greater scrutiny of Chinese influence in Latin America. Now let's take a quick break.
Welcome back to Ita See the World. and Wagi. Finally, let's dive into what Trump's return means for U.S.-China ties, particularly in the context of Taiwan. A big question is, how can Taiwan's semiconductor industry navigate such changes?
Before leaving office, President Biden implemented new AI chip export regulations, dividing the global market into 3 categories. With the first category, free from export quota restrictions, 18 countries and regions, including Japan, Britain, Taiwan, South Korea, and Germany. The second category, imposing export quota restrictions from Singapore, Malaysia, Israel, to Saudi Arabia and other countries. And the third category, with China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, countries that are prohibited from importing AI, chip-related technology, and also products. Wen-Ti, what did Biden aim to do with these last-minute restrictions right before he left office?
I think what Biden was probably trying to do was to buy insurance and buy time for U.S. and other economies. By that I mean that I think Biden sees Trump as a equal opportunity tough talker, in the sense that oftentimes when it comes to negotiation, when it comes to deal seeking, Trump treats friends and foes relatively similarly. Which means that under Trump, just because you have been sticking with America for decades, doesn't necessarily mean that you will automatically get a better treatment from Trump's America, for example. In that sense, that's always going to complicate when it comes to multilateral economic regionalism, for example. And I think for Biden, what he's trying to do then is to say that if Trump is going to treat friends and foes largely similarly, then Biden is going to issue this directive that tells us, no, we are going to treat friends and foes differently. Indeed, we are going to be very specific in classifying into 3 or more tiers. That way, I think Biden hopefully will create enough path dependency with this outgoing directive, so that by the time Trump comes in, even if Trump wants to do things his style, he would have to travel a bit farther and take a bit longer till Trump get to where he wants to get to when it comes to negotiating trading relations with other countries.
Stop Trump from acting more unilaterally.
I think that's one way to put it. Yes, I mean it's stopping is not going to happen, but mitigating, slowing down, may be what Biden is trying to do, which is what I'm trying to say. That he's trying to buy time.
So Raymond, what do you think of these chip regulations?
I think the policy of Biden administration with regard to semiconductors is very clear. One branch is for the CHIPS Act and Science Act, to use incentives to give monies to boost the American investment and research, also attract the foreign manufacturers to base themselves within the U.S. And the other one is friendshoring, to secure the resilience of the supply chain, so that in case of emergency, the U.S. will secure its supply of critical, especially high-end semiconductors. That's what Biden administration are doing. So those are seeing semiconductors as strategically important materials that need to be protected, and need to be protected with alliance building and with friends. So friendshoring is the first tier, and Taiwan is among the first tier. But Trump sees this totally different. See this as trade surplus things, which is about 50 years ago's view, and not critically important, no importance from the strategic or national security or supply chain perspective. That's make the markedly different approaches between the two administrations.
So another concern, I believe, many of our audience in Taiwan here is about TSMC and Taiwan Semiconductors Manufacturing Company. I mean, on January 20th, Trump threatened tariffs of up to 100% on Taiwan chips imports, and Taiwan produces about 90% of the world's most advanced chips. So a key part of Trump's policy has been bring back manufacturing to the U.S. So William, what is Trump trying to do here? And are the tariffs up to 100% on Taiwan's chips necessary to bring back manufacturing to the U.S.? What do you think?
Well, I don't think that effort is not going to be successful. I mean, economists of every political persuasion have basically agreed that tariffs don't work. They're ineffective because all they do is raise the price of the goods that the customer is going to have to pay. So it's an ill-considered strategy. You know, in the past, Trump has made other statements about Taiwan's chip industry. He said that Taiwan had stolen it from the United States, which is clearly not true. He's also complained that you know, they're being overcharged. The U.S. is being overcharged for chips. To some extent, Taiwan has tried to mitigate that by building a semiconductor plant in Arizona, I guess. I think Taiwan has done everything it could to try to persuade Trump that Taiwan is not the threat. The threat is from China. Taiwan is, in fact, a friend and a dependent friend at that, and you shouldn't be picking on your friends to try to get results with anyone else. I remain very concerned about Trump's overall policy toward China. He selected some people who clearly have said very positive things about the importance of Taiwan, including his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, including you know, Mike Waltz, including Alex Wang. But on the other hand, you know, at the same time, he himself doesn't seem to have sufficient respect or gratitude to Taiwan for the fact that it really is in the U.S. camp already. Yeah. So he, I think, needs to lighten up on Taiwan, be more supportive, and I would like to see a much more positive approach to Taiwan in general than what we've heard up till now.
Raymond, what do all of these tariffs mean for Taiwan and the semiconductor industry here, given that many people say it's Taiwan's shield, whether you believe in it or not?
The talk about Silicon Shield is about whether the contribution will be made by the ownership of base or location of the predominant capability for manufacturing in Taiwan. But under Trump, it's like the last generation's talk, because we are now facing to Trump see this concentration as a liability on Taiwan, which troubles us. And it's very misguided. I will echo Bill's point, because TSMC is not a Taiwanese firm. It's an international firm. Their major clients, including US companies like Apple, like NVIDIA, and especially when the AI chips are needed, the importance of TSMC's manufacturing capability will be even more important. And if you consider that the sources like chip design is majorly US companies' interest, and materials Japanese interest, and the laser reading and writing technologies from Holland, from the Netherlands. So it's really an international company. And so you see this not as that Taiwan is making money out of this. It's international cooperation to secure the most profitable, most efficient ways of manufacturing this. And because Taiwan has this very, very unique ecosystem of producing and getting things done. So if you see that way, you will be aligned with Trump's administration's approach. So the problem is now is very misguided, and actually it will not achieve because the chip industry will not shift it to their manufacturing base overnight. And rather, it will have the side effect to driven those American, US companies to locate in East Asia so as that it will evade the high tariffs that were entering the US companies. So it will not only harm the US consumers interests, also harms U.S. business interests, which Trump was not willing to see. So we really wish that some people will talk to Trump's people and to change the. You can see that as a major commodities or commercial goods, but chips is different. Chips is a separate category, could not be seen as a trade surplus things.
For the chip ecosystem itself, do you feel this could harm innovation, harm the development of the industry?
I think the U.S. and Japan and the Netherlands holds very tight about their technology edges, and especially quantum computing, and China is trying to compete. So the allies are trying to secure their leading roles against China. And another side effect, if you push higher tariffs on Taiwanese produced chips, and to give a lesser degree of level of tariffs about Chinese-made chips, you will have reverse reliance that will trying to driven those demands toward buying Chinese goods, which is not secure, it's not according to U.S. national security interests. So you'll have a reverse effect that U.S. wanted it.
Wen-Ti, how do you believe this double-edged sword strategy is working? Given we've heard Raymond, we've heard William talk about how this is actually harming U.S. and Taiwan companies as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the short term, it's going to create some turbulence for sure for Taiwanese businesses, but in the longer term, I think Taiwan has its own technologies, irreplaceability on its side, so they will find a way out of it in the longer term, I think, for Taiwan. So in that sense, what I'm concerned about really is more about what this does to global economic structure. I think over the last few years, U.S. has managed to prove largely that if we have to choose between U.S. and China, then U.S. is largely the safer investment destination, given the high degree of political risk of doing business in China. What these rounds of almost indiscriminate imposition of tariff against friends and foe economies alike is that it's signaling to many other economies that maybe America isn't as political risk-free an investment environment as well. So I think over the last few years, we finally got to a point where many businesses around the world are pursuing a China plus one strategy, trying to find ways to diversify away from singular dependence on Chinese market. One hopes that this new round of indiscriminate trade war that's perhaps in the offing won't lead to something closer to a America plus one strategy for other businesses that historically were comfortable with America before.
Last but not least, this is a question for all of you. I'll start with you, Wen-Ti. Given the uncertainty, what do you feel Taiwan needs to do to prepare or handle Trump 2.0?
Well, that's $1 million question. I think, first of all, show strategic patience. Second, pursue personal level diplomacy with the Trump administration to increase channel of communication. And thirdly, find ways to network with other like-minded economies, both through the U.S. and perhaps sometimes, if you need be, in spite of the U.S.
Bill.
In addition to the excellent points made by Wen-Ti, I would say the most important thing, perhaps, is to continue to build up Taiwan's defenses, military and otherwise, to prepare to make Taiwan as strong, as invulnerable as possible.
Raymond?
Yeah, there will be definitely growing demands on Taiwan, no matter in terms of balancing trade surplus with the U.S. or strengthening Taiwan's defense reform and the expenditures on defense. And to meet those, Taiwan needs to persuade the U.S. decision makers that Taiwan is in an indispensable role, which will be critically important for the U.S. core interest, that U.S. will not consider into selling off Taiwan, rather than building stronger alliance and friendship and cooperation relations with Taiwan. That's a very, very high demand for the Taiwan's decision making. We need to work now.
From pulling out of international organizations to territorial ambitions and trade disputes, Donald Trump's return is reshaping the world. We'll continue to keep an eye on these developments.
And that wraps up today's Ita World. Thanks for watching. See you next time.